Welcome to part 2 of the webinar, Note-Taking and Organizational Workflow Strategies, brought to you by the Graduate Writing Center at Teachers College, Columbia University. I'm Kelly France, and I'm a Graduate Writing Center Fellow, and I will be taking you through this webinar. In part 1, we talked about note-taking strategies. In this part, we'll talk about brainstorming and planning, ways to make connections across studies, organizing your ideas, and preparing to write. Let's begin with some questions to ask yourself about your own brainstorming and planning processes. First, what is your process for preparing to write? What do you do? Second, how do you choose a topic to write about? Third, how do you make connections across your notes, your readings, and the lecture materials? And finally, how do you organize all of the source information as well as your ideas? We will address some of these questions in this webinar. Here are some ways that the staff at our Graduate Writing Center choose a topic and prepare to write. Meredith says, I'm an old school, legal pad, bullet point, graphic organizer kind of note taker. I also tend to write notes in different sections on the page and sometimes in different directions. I then box off different sections with different colored pens by theme and then transcribe them to something digital. Raven shares, highlighting after I've already taken notes to categorize ideas helps me a lot with this. The syllabus, first lecture, and final assignment instructions are a good indication of the course themes and big ideas or questions. I assign each theme or question in a certain color, and as they pop up in readings or lectures, I highlight them by color. By the end, I just look through my binder, and whatever color I've highlighted the most, I'll write about that topic, since it shows I have the most evidence to support it. In addition to choosing a topic, preparing to write involves making connections and organizing ideas. So what are some ways that we can do this? Well, you can start by rereading and taking notes on some of your course notes or your reading notes. You can notice some themes or key ideas or questions that emerge as you reread and write those down. You can try free writing, which is a very open, unstructured kind of writing or journaling. This allows you to just get some of your ideas down on paper and then see if any of those ideas are worth exploring further. You can try some concept mapping to play around with the connections between ideas or themes. You can also try talking it out with either a friend or a professor or a writing consultant. Sometimes talking out your ideas allows you to better articulate them, and it allows you to notice what aspects or areas of your topic spark interest in you or that you can talk a lot about. You can try using note cards or sticky notes to play around with ideas or themes, and this is especially useful if you're preparing to write a literature review. Also useful if you're preparing to write a literature review is using Excel sheets and organizing those by theme. So this is an example of that, where you have your sources across the top and your themes across the side. This is what you could call a literature review matrix. So I'll now share some examples of strategies for making connections and organizing ideas that some of our fellows use. You can try coding and labeling your sources or notes. For example, this is when I was working on a literature review, and you'll see in green are the sources that I was working with. And in addition to recording the key information like research question methods, findings, etc., I also added some columns in an Excel sheet where I was able to categorize them or code them by themes. And so then when I'm returning to these articles and trying to see how they're all connected to each other and how I might want to organize how I write about these articles, I can filter it by different themes. And I also keep a notebook where I just record these different themes that I'm using. You can also try concept mapping. This is an example of Catherine's OneNote and a concept map that she wrote out by hand using her iPad. There are also a number of online platforms that you can use to play around with mind mapping. This is highly recommended by some of our staff members. You'll see examples here of Catherine's Padlet and Miro boards. You can also try some good old-fashioned outlining, and outlining is a great way to think about your idea and put it in more of a linear format, breaking it down into the sections that you plan to have in your paper. Or you might want to take the process of exploring connections between ideas off of your computer. For example, when I get especially stuck on organizing a big paper, such as a literature review, I sometimes write key ideas on note cards and place them all over my floor. Then I can move them around and see how they're all connected to each other, how different sources could potentially be grouped together. And then I can add note cards for potential subheadings and headings, and this helps me get my ideas flowing. Other strategies that could work, especially if you feel a bit stuck with your writing and planning process, you could try free writing, step away from your computer, open up a notebook, and just write your ideas down, let them flow. You could try going for a walk. Maybe as you walk, your ideas start to flow and you can leave yourself some voice notes. Or you can try talking your ideas out with a friend. Catherine shares that she gets her best ideas in the shower. I dream in there, she says, and when I hop out, I immediately write down what popped up. Sometimes ideas come to me when I walk, and I'll use my phone to dictate something in my notes, or I'll type it into the notes section. As you've seen, there are a number of different strategies for brainstorming and planning to write. Different strategies work for different fellows and also for different types of projects in different stages of the writing process. Despite all of this variety, there are some key takeaways that you can note. First, start by rereading your notes. Think about what speaks to you and what questions you have about the materials. You can use themes from the syllabus, from the readings, and from your notes to guide you in choosing a topic and organizing your ideas. You can try speaking to other students, teaching assistants, or your professors, or maybe someone at the Graduate Writing Center. And try using more than one strategy. Like I mentioned, different strategies work for different projects and at different times, so when you feel stuck, switch it up. And finally, get to know how you brainstorm, visualize, and get ideas flowing. Different strategies work for different people, and part of this process involves you learning a little bit about what works for you. So that concludes part 2 of our note-taking and organizational workflow webinar, where we've covered some strategies for making connections, organizing ideas, and preparing to write. In the next part, we'll talk about some workflow and productivity strategies.